3 days after you put this belt on Bob Backlund on pay-per-view, uh, it's gonna be, Kevin Nash. Diesel is going to defeat Bob. He doesn't just lose to Nash, though. Kevin Nash beats Bob Backlund in Madison Square Garden in 8 seconds on a house show. So, Bob Backlund, this big high-profile pay-per-view win, loses it 3 days later, 8 seconds, house show, Madison Square Garden. Now, the match was filmed, and it would be shown on TV afterwards, but am I crazy for thinking that maybe this whole thing would have meant more if it would have gone, like, 5 minutes and took place on Raw?
Well, I don't know. Obviously what they did worked. And again, the fact that it's Bob Backlund who had been there, who all the fans in the New York area and wherever the old territory was, they all knew Bob Backlund. They all knew that he had been the champion, and then to do this and then put Diesel over in 8 seconds. That's pretty impressive.
You made a point there that I didn't even consider when I was writing this, and that's that Bob Backlund is a staple in the New York area. So whether it's on TV or not, especially because they were able to film it and show it on TV later, it's a big deal to beat Bob Backlund in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What? You just turned my head around on this thinking. Well done. So Meltzer is going to call this the WWF's latest attempt to create a new Hulk Hogan. And it's pretty clear, they're trying to capitalize. Nash has got incredible size and look. And he'd been getting this babyface reaction despite working as a heel. So I think that Vince saw his size and the reaction he was getting and decided, okay, let's give him the Hogan treatment. The first thing I want to ask you about, Ted, is anti-heroes in wrestling. Diesel is absolutely one. Steve Austin would go on to do it at a much larger scale. It makes me want to ask you, so if you can kind of dig back into your memory banks, who is the first anti-hero that you remember seeing in the business? Does anybody stick out?
Anti-hero? What do you mean?
A heel that gets over with the audience.
Well, yeah, that's the whole thing. People like guys who are tough guys. People like a tough guy. So, it's like, I don't care who you are. It's one thing to, be a cheating, you know what I'm saying? Like the heel that's pulling something out of his tights. But when you go out there and you're just a badass tough guy, people like tough guys. It's, and it's kind of like, over a period of time, it's like everybody began to love him. And that's because he was a tough guy.
It's almost like the Terminator, like the second Terminator movie, where he was a heel in the first one, but now he's still a kind of a heel. Like, he's not a great guy, but he's doing
exactly.
The right. Yeah,
exactly. He's a tough guy.
That's
people like tough guys. So.
I was trying to think of the first anti-hero I remember seeing in wrestling, and honestly, it probably happened in some territory somewhere along the way, but the first guy I remember is Jake Roberts, where it was like, he's coming out here with the snake, and he's kind of terrorizing people with it. Even when he's a baby face afterwards, what does he do? When he beats somebody with the DDT, he humiliates them by putting the snake on them afterwards.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I think Jake was like the first anti-hero in wrestling, but I don't know. If you can think of somebody else, I'd love to hear about it.
I don't know. He may have been.
Maybe. Well, when Nash gets this spot, do you think it's a desperation move by Vince? Obviously, he's just lost Randy Savage. Hogan's gone. All of this old guard is out the door. And this formula that worked for so well in the 80s, big guy who's fighting off a bunch of big monstrous heels, it worked really well. So do you think that was it that Vince was trying to accomplish here?
I can't be sure, but maybe. It may be, yeah.
This is kind of a weird one, but Kevin Nash has been criticized as not being a great champion. That a lot of people consider his run a failure because of attendance and ratings at the time. But the wrestling business was down as a whole, so I think it's unfair to push the blame on Kevin Nash. Um, Ted, do you have any thoughts on why a guy with Kevin Nash's size and obvious charisma, why do you think he was unable to kickstart the business again with the WWF? Any theories?
I don't have a theory. I mean, I just don't know. And again, there's a lot of things to be taken into consideration. The what was going on. Terms of you talk about people showing up for wrestling matches and stuff like that. Like, okay, for like right now, I don't know. I don't. Our economy in this country it's okay, but it's not great.
Hmm.
And so then you ask yourself the question: so is it affecting? It's kind of like if you're the breadwinner at home and you're not making as much money, you got to pay. You got to pay for food, you got to pay for housing, you got to pay for your car, and all that other stuff. So, what would be the first thing that you stop spending money on? And that would be entertainment.
Yep.
And so, who knows? I don't know. Entertainment wise, if I don't know. I don't know what the numbers were. I don't know how good or bad he did.
I mean, the numbers weren't awful. They just weren't what they had once been. And I think anything less than is considered like a failure for whatever reason.
Yeah,
I think it's also worth noting that like I think if a lot of people had in people's minds, Hulk Hogan is synonymous with wrestling. The WWF is synonymous with wrestling through Hulk Hogan, and
yeah,
now Hogan's gone, and it's like, well, let's pick up the pieces. Oh, by the way, the WWF was just on trial for steroids, so it's like that perception probably didn't help. So there's a lot of extenuating
yeah,
circumstances to your point that could impact
yeah.
somebody like Nash. Well, Ted, your $1 million team is going to defeat Luger's Guts and Glory team at Survivor Series, and I think it's safe to say that the bloom is off the rose for Lex in this era, despite the resources that were poured into his Lex Express gimmick and the marketing, etc. Ted, for your money, if you had to pick one or the other, I'm going to give you a choice for your new flag bearer of the WWF. Would you select Diesel or Lex Luger? Gun to your head, you got to pick one or the other to run be your new champion.
Lex Luger.
Lex Luger,
Yeah,
just based on look.
based on look and just overall his ability to get over.
Okay.
You know, and again, I have nothing wrong. Yeah, me and Kevin, we get along great. So, but that was it was kind of like I think that those guys came in. And I think back then Kevin probably looked at me as like old school. It's our time. Old man, your your time has passed.
Part of the old guard.
And I was part of that old guard. I guess that's why I wasn't wrestling anymore.
I think the other obvious issue with Kevin Nash as a babyface champion is that he's so big that it's like who's going to put him in peril, right? That's why they wound up bringing Sid in, and
Yeah,
they had him feuding with Mabel at one point. Like they were just trying to put him with all these big guys. So it's like to me, Kevin Nash is a big natural heel. Let him just be a heel.
yeah, I agree. Yeah.